Right now, is there a radical Islamic crisis and an expansionist Kremlin crisis for world leaders? And what's the appropriate response for the wolves on the prowl?
I view them as two different things. Is there, a jihadist, radical Islam crisis? You bet your life there is. Do you know we had a British soldier beheaded in a London street last year, in broad daylight, outside a school? So we haven't got to go as far as Mosul to see appalling things going on. I would say this on the Islamic crisis: our foreign policy over the last 2 decades has been so inconsistent and so bad and so wrong, we've actually helped stoke and create some of this. Just last year, the British government and the American government wanted to arm the rebels in the fight in Syria against Assad, and these are the very same people who've now become ISIS. So, I mean, come on. We have been badly led on this. Now, when it comes to Putin, I know that it's the trendy view of everybody in Washington and London to say that Putin is a monster. But let's just question our own sanity. Yes, he may well be a gangster. Yes, he may well be a bad guy. But in the last couple of days, we've seen the European Parliament say they're going to fast drive a free trade deal, a partnership agreement with Ukraine. And we've got Obama and Cameron and NATO announcing we're going to take part in military exercises in the Ukraine. We are encroaching on Putin's space. We should be viewing the Ukraine as a buffer, if you like, between the East and the West. And what we're doing is we're directly challenging and threatening Mr. Putin. If you poke a Russian bear with a stick, don't be surprised when he reacts.
What do we do, Westerners, about the fact that ISIS is recruiting young people from America and from Britain to join their ranks?
We in Britain have had 4 decades of state-sponsored multiculturalism, where we use taxpayers' money to divide everybody. Not to join everyone together, but to divide everybody. We've turned a blind eye in Britain to Sharia law in parts of our big cities. We've completely ignored polygamous marriages. We have female genital mutilation going on. Tens of thousands of cases in my country every single year. Not one prosecution. So I would actually say, if I looked at our schools, I looked at our prisons, these are the places where people are being radicalized, and these are organizations within the control of the state. So actually, there's quite a lot we can do to deal with this in our own countries, but we've got to throw into the bin this sort of PC agenda that says that we daren't talk to certain groups of people in some way for fear of being called racist or for fear of being Islamophobic or whatever else it may be. We've got to apply the rule of law evenly to all of our citizens in our countries, regardless whether they're black or white or yellow, Catholic or Muslim or Jewish. And until we start doing that, I'm afraid we're going to see more of these problems.
How is Great Britain experiencing the dangers of loose immigration, and what advice would you have for Americans who are struggling with President Obama's willful immigration border policy?
There's been a big shift in British politics, and the growth of UKIP is part of that. And one of the reasons for the growth of UKIP is we have thrown away immigration controls. We now have a total open border to 485 million people. Do you know why? I'll show you. This is my British passport. And what does it say at the top? It says European Union. It's the first thing my British passport says is European Union. And what it means is not just 63 million Brits, but nearly 500 million people now have one of these and have the total rights of free movement to come, to work and settle in my country, to bring their kids to be educated, to use the health system. And what it has done, it's driven down wages for ordinary people. It's put a lot of our own people out of work. It has led to cultural disintegration in many of our towns and cities, and in what was the most easygoing of all European countries. We've always been very relaxed about immigration in Britain because we've always controlled it sensibly. Immigration into Britain is now running at tenfold the number that it was 20 years ago, and there is a strong feeling that something must be done. And I get a feeling that this now is the top issue in British politics. Culture, identity, whether we remain a Christian country, these are the things that actually matter more than the economy. And what I can see in America is that it's actually rising up the agenda here too.
So how do you fix immigration without being called a nativist, a xenophobe, a racist?
Oh, I've been called everything. I mean, I have been called all the names under the sun by the cosy Westminster political and media elites. The way you overcome it is to stick to your guns, know that you're right, and to trust the good judgment of ordinary, decent people, because they see through this rubbish.
From where you sit, tell us what it looks like. What does America look like right now, and what's President Obama and the hard left doing to transform it?
I mean, listen, I'm a guest in your country, and I don't want to be rude, but it all looks a bit rudderless. Seems to me the chap's on the golf course every day. And I could be wrong, but I'm told he is on the golf course every day. He's a lame duck president coming towards the end. And in terms of the international standing of America, I can't think at any point, I mean, maybe, when Watergate went badly wrong, but in general terms, America's standing in the world in terms of the respect people may have for America, or perhaps even the fear people may have of America, is diminishing with this man as president.
So UKIP is rising, it's on the ascendancy. Talk about tips for the Tea Party movement in America, where Tea Party and grassroots people feel underrepresented or unrepresented in Washington by the establishment Republicans. What would you say?
Well, there is a key difference in that the Tea Party operates within the Republican Party to try and get influence within that party, to change its direction, to change its representatives in Congress, its presidential candidates, whereas UKIP actually gave up with trying to reform the Conservative or Labour parties in Britain and set out on our own. I personally think that you influence the political system more on the outside, trying to steal votes away from them than you do from within. Now, I understand that these are different political systems, but I would just ask Republicans, Tea Party supporting Republicans, if you continue on this current route, if, for example, Romney was to be chosen again as your presidential candidate, why on earth would you go on being Republicans? I mean, why would you do that? It might be better to form something new. And we've only got to go a few miles north of here to Canada to see this happened in the 80s and 90s, that the Reform Party split away from the Conservative Party of Canada and completely recalibrated it. So, without telling you what to do, it seems to me that time is running out for the Republicans. You surely have to have the right person with some degree of radicalism to be your presidential candidate next time round, or I think my view from here is many in the Tea Party will say, well, actually, we may have to form our own party.
Don't you have the same thing in your country, though, when it comes to Cameron is good on some issues, but not all issues? Do they call you a purist? Do they call you an extremist?
Well, they used to. They used to regard me as a bit of a joke, but they're not laughing anymore because we're taking their votes. And here's the thing. If people practice genuine politics that is patriotic, that believes in the nation and the culture, that believes in lifting the burden of government off the backs of small people who want to, set up a business or do whatever they want to. It's not just traditional Conservatives that vote for you. You get the blue-collar vote that used to vote Labour in Britain or Democrat in America. And the last person I can see in America that understood this was Ronnie Reagan. And Reagan got lots of working-class people voting Republican because he offered them something. And that, I feel, that in some ways the Republican Party and the Conservative Party have gone down the same road, and it's the wrong one.
What are the lessons learned for Britain when it comes to having joined the EU on national sovereignty? What'd you learn?
Well, never join a club whose laws become primary over yours and whose courts can overrule yours. Never listen to career politicians who reassure you, don't worry, none of this really matters, it'll only be a little club about trade. This is fundamental. Democracy is something that matters. My country, the land of Magna Carta, the mother of parliaments, a nation that, as you did, that went to war twice, not for ourselves, but to defend the principle of democracy across the rest of Europe. And here we are, having surrendered that. Effectively, what we've done is given away our birthright. And I'm very angry at our politicians that have done this, and I'm determined to get it back. I can't imagine that America, whatever mistakes America might make, I cannot imagine ever people in America doing that. I showed you the passport earlier. with European Union written on it. They've even got a new flag, a new anthem, a president in Europe. And we are supposed to be now subordinate to this unelected bunch of, I'll say bureaucrats, it's politer, based in Brussels. So, no, supranational government doesn't work. The nation state is the right building block.
What do you think the prospects are of you guys getting out?
We will. We will. We've had enough. The penny's dropped. We understand that we cannot be an independent, self-governing, proud nation and members of this union. And every day I see more and more people from other political parties beginning to make similar noises to the ones that we've been making, over the course of the last 10 to 15 years. So actually, what was considered to be a bit of a kooky opinion on Britain, Europe and the world is now the settled majority mainstream view of the British people. And if I've got one achievement in politics, it is, I think, that I've managed to make this a respectable thing for people to think.
If Britain comes out, will it all unravel?
Hopefully, yes. And I say that because actually, I don't just think the EU is bad for Britain, I think it's bad for the rest of Europe too. I grew up in a Europe divided from east to west by a Berlin Wall. I'm now getting middle-aged in a Europe that is divided north to south by the euro. The euro has brought untold misery to the people of the Mediterranean. Youth unemployment rates in some of those countries approaching 60%. They're now going into deflation, and there is a sort of a mood of despair and hopelessness about some of those Mediterranean countries. So I hope we get rid of the whole thing. I hope we get rid of the whole experiment. I hope we return to a Europe based as it was in the late 1940s. We had the Council of Europe. The idea was that neighbours should get together around the table to agree, common ideas on sensible things. I am perfectly happy to be engaged with Europe, to trade with Europe, to cooperate with Europe, to be good next door neighbours with Europe. I'm perfectly happy to buy their cars. I like drinking their champagne. I've got no problem with any of it. What I don't want us to do is to give up our rights and abilities to be distinctive individual characters with our own democracies. And the funny thing is this, that in the early days of my career, I was seen as somebody standing up and saying no, saying, let's stamp our feet and protest. And actually now, I think what I've got is the positive vision of a better Europe, a freer Europe, and a more democratic Europe. We've actually now got, I think, the progressive side of the argument. And history says that when you win the upper hand and get the progressive side of an argument, you're probably going to win.
What do you think Margaret Thatcher would say?
She'd be a member of UKIP. There's no question about it. There's just no question about it. She would have been a member of UKIP. She would not have been a member of a Conservative Party that had increased the burden of taxation on ordinary people, a Conservative Party whose obsession with climate change has led to hugely increased domestic bills, damaged manufacturing industry. She wouldn't have countenanced a Europe in which we weren't free to make our own trade deals around the world. We have it done for us by a bureaucrat in Brussels. No. I have absolutely no doubt that from somewhere up there, Mrs. Thatcher, I'm sure, will be cheering on UKIP.
So you've been in the European Parliament. Tell us what the elites there who want to run the world, tell us about them. What are they like? Are they worth our respect?
In the main, incredibly bland, incredibly dull, grey, in every sense, devoid of humour. Irony escapes them completely. Sort of desperately earnest, so sincere, and none of them have ever had a job, and none of them have ever lived in the real world, and none of them go out and meet ordinary people, and very few of them have got a clue. Having said that, there are one or two brilliant people. Jacques Delors, in the late 80s and 90s, the French bureaucrat, although I don't agree with what he was doing, was an utterly brilliant person. The new man that's taken over the Commission, Mr. Juncker, who was for 19 years the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, and he's quite a clever political operator. So you do find within them one or two exceptionally bright people, but in the main, they don't pass what I call the Farage test. I judge everybody, you see, on the Farage test. Number one, would I give them a job? And number two, would I want to have a drink with them? And nearly all of them fail on both scores. With
your background in the economic sector, tell us what you feel are the threats for the economic policies, the Federal Reserve, the growing debt, the IMF, the bailouts, the government picking winners and losers. How big of a threat is the economic sphere?
Well, we saw a terrible shock to the system back in 2008, you know, and we saw governments in Europe and in America, frankly, seeing problems that they realised were actually bigger than them. I mean, it was quite a scary period of time. I don't think those problems have fully gone away. As I've already said, we've got a huge Eurozone problem. A Portuguese bank the other day went into administration. I think that's the canary in the mine shaft. I think there are more big banking problems to come. I think the levels of indebtedness, I mean, America's got growth, the UK's got growth, we've still got horrific levels of indebtedness, which are building up every single year. So I still think there are economic shocks and problems to come. And whilst I don't any longer work in the field of investment, I would just say that I think gold has formed quite a good base down here at 12 or 1300, and it'll be quite a lot higher at some point in the next few years. The problems, as I say, we can raise half a cheer in Britain and America that our economies are not the way they are in Spain and Portugal. We can raise half a cheer, but neither the Obama administration or the Cameron administration have done anything to deal with debt.
Discuss the left's war on fossil fuel and their obsession with climate change.
Well, you know, we did go through a period of time from the mid-70s up until about the turn of the century with rising temperatures. No question about that, we did. Funny, isn't it? Because I remember in 1972, a consensus of experts telling us we had global cooling and we were headed for a new ice age. But so this caught hold very, very strongly in the mid-1990s. It caught hold here and Germany and Britain and elsewhere. Look, I don't know whether carbon emissions are leading to temperatures going up or down. I mean, I have no idea. I'm not a scientist. You know, what I do know is that sunspot activity has a huge influence over global temperatures. What I do know is that volcanic eruptions, some of them under the Pacific that we can't even see, lead to more CO2 going into the atmosphere than man can create. What I do know are two things. Firstly, from my perspective as Britain, you know, we produce 1.8% of global CO2. What is the point of us closing down British manufacturing industry when we only produce 1.8%, when India and China, between them, are building 4 new coal-fired power stations every single week? That's the first thing I know, is actually, from our perspective, there's very little we can do anyway. And secondly, you know, just what are we actually doing here? We're pursuing a set of policies, and let's take wind energy as a fantastic example. Lots of big landowners in Britain get paid £250,000 a year for just siting these ugly monstrosities on their land. Who pays the bill? Ordinary people and our businesses and our manufacturing, which floods across to India and elsewhere as we become more and more uncompetitive. So whether global warming is happening or not is a scientific debate I am not going to get into. I don't know. I'm agnostic on this particular issue. What I do know is what we're doing in the West to counter it is totally ineffective, given the massive industrial rise in the Far East, and actually is once again making the rich richer and the poor poorer. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
So reading about what you did with Prince Charles when he came to the European Parliament, would you still do that again? Tell viewers what you did, and would you do it again?
Prince Charles, Charlie boy, turned up at the European Parliament, and like a well-brought-up chap, I did stand and show my mark of respect when he walked into the room. He walked in, he sat down, he said that the European Union was absolutely wonderful, but it needed to be more powerful because it had to deal with climate change, and if we didn't, the North Pole ice cap would melt within 7 years. And I thought to myself, hang on, he's going to be our king in a few years' time. It's not for the King of England to give away powers that are ours to a foreign set of institutions. And anyway, I think his views on climate change are eccentric, frankly, to the point of stupidity. And that was about 7 years ago. I've just had a look, actually. The ice caps are much bigger this year than they were last year. So I refused to join the chorus of standing ovation, and I sat there with my arms crossed. Would I do the same again? You bet your life I would.
So you've become a popular figure with young people there and libertarians. Square the fact that you're also opposed to gay marriage.
Well, gay marriage was not in the Conservative manifesto last time round, and to the utter bewilderment of everybody, including Stonewall, who were the biggest gay charity in Britain, who themselves were not campaigning for gay marriage, given that we've got civil partnerships that actually work, extremely effectively. I just said, why are we spending huge amounts of parliamentary time? Why are we having a big national upset over an issue that wasn't in your manifesto and that, frankly, I don't think is a priority for modern Britain? My real concern is that we are subject to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. That is the highest law of our land. We have an established church in our country. If we're going to conduct gay marriages, as we now do, in our civil offices, our registry offices, it will be a very short period of time before a discrimination case is taken to Strasbourg, and who knows, we may finish up with our churches being made to conduct gay marriages against their will. And I think that a true libertarian says that tolerance is a two-way street. And whilst it's a better world that gays have rights they didn't have 40 years ago, I think there is a little bit of room for Christians to have rights too.
So talk about the pushback that you get and the heckling and the catcalls. How do you deal with that, and what gives you hope?
There's a lovely story, Hans Christian Andersen, a children's story, and it's about the emperor that isn't wearing any clothes, and everyone says to the emperor, you're absolutely wonderful, and no one dares tell the emperor that he isn't wearing any clothes. And in the end, they actually believe that the emperor is wearing clothes, because he says he's wearing clothes. And one day, a little boy comes along and says, the emperor's got no clothes. They all say, my goodness me, he's got no clothes. And the whole myth is exposed. And what I've tried to do is to sit on the front seat of the European Parliament and to show that the emperor's got no clothes. That actually, nobody in Europe ever wanted this to become a unified, centralised, bureaucratised state, and that actually the whole thing isn't working, and they can stand up and say it's going wonderfully. They just sound like Stalin saying that the tractor production figures are very good when the people are actually having a worse year than they had the year before. So I've met with considerable opposition, and at times it's been like a Christmas pantomime where I'm the villain in the middle and everyone around me is booing and jeering. And a lot of my friends say, but Nigel, it's not normal for people to go into situations and not want to be liked by their peers. But I couldn't care less. I was nearly killed in an aeroplane crash 4.5 years ago. I was smashed to pieces. Very, very lucky to survive. I got through that. I've got a mission to do. I want my country back. I want us free from Brussels and this European Union. I want the rest of Europe free too. And I won't rest until I win.
Tips to Washington politicians, conservative politicians, what would you say?
Remember that many of your potential voters are not necessarily wealthy, business owners or middle classes. Remember the real people. Remember the little people. Remember the semi-skilled people. Remember the working classes. They'll be the most patriotic Americans that exist out there. At the moment, they've got no one to speak for them. The liberal left, headed up by Obama and the others, they don't connect with them, and the current Republican Party doesn't connect with them. Remember the ordinary, decent people. The people that get up early in the morning. The people that work hard. The people that pay their taxes. The people that try and bring their kids up properly. Really, really good people. And the reason UKIP's done well in Britain is a lot of those people now think we're speaking for them. At the moment in America, they haven't got a voice.